So we see right here, that is Iceland, right? This is another, no, that's Ireland. Yeah, this is another, see? Islandia, Iceland. And then there's Greenland hanging over it. Greenland, right? But what's this? What's this little square right under Iceland, adjacent to Greenland? Looks like it says Friesland or something like that. What could that be about? There's a mystery for you. So I'm already starting to feel the wear and tear of VEDN. It is VEDN day 16. I am over halfway through VEDN, the month of November, and I'm already out of ideas of things to talk about. The reason this video is coming so late is because it took me hours to come up with this topic. But I finally came up with it. So I guess I'm going to talk about drugs, my opinion on drugs, my perspective on drugs, what drugs are about. So drugs. So what's the deal with drugs? I think drugs have a bit of an unfair reputation. I think, okay, so it's a complicated subject, right? It is. It's complicated. It ain't simple. This ain't no easy shit to figure out, okay? But, drugs. Drugs, drugs, drugs. Which are good and which are bad. Drugs, drugs, drugs. Ask your mom and ask your dad. It's not a matter of which are good and which are bad. That's a false dichotomy. Because, you know, drugs, it's not like there's good drugs and there's bad drugs. There are drugs which do different things to your body and your mind. And they have different effects for different purposes. But anyway, I'm gonna stop beating around the bush. So I'm a drug user. First drug that I ever really got into was caffeine. I love caffeine. I'm kind of getting back into caffeine more lately. I was kind of off of it for the most part for a while because I was drinking mostly decaf for a long time, and that does have caffeine in it. But my God, like real, you know, coffee, it hits differently now than it used to. And it really jogs my brain. It really gets me inspired. It really makes me think about things. And it also relaxes me. Like, I'll go to work, because sometimes I work starting in the afternoon into the evening. I'll go to work after having had a day of coffee, and I'll just feel so relaxed. Like, everything is just fine. Which is interesting. You don't normally associate caffeine with relaxation. But it's a very mentally stimulating drug. And it is like a real druggy drug, you know? I think people don't think of it in that way. Or if they refer to caffeine as a drug or think of it that way, that it's like, oh yeah, it's technically a psychoactive drug. No, it's not. It's like seriously legit a drug, and it's a really nice one. It feels very good, but it's very common and it's very socially accepted. There's no real stigma or taboo against it. At most, you'll find those snobby people who are like, these people addicted to their caffeine, what losers, I'm able to just get up in the morning and I'm totally fine. Well, I was pretty much that way when I was on decaf, but I'm telling you guys, it's worth it. Okay, it's worth it. And then, okay, so the second drug that I really got into was cannabis. And that's a pretty good one. I don't like it as much as caffeine, but I do like it. But I think for a time, there was a time when it was really important for me. It was like my favorite drug. And the thing is, like, I used to be really depressed. Like, I used to have brain fog, not be able to think properly, not be able to emote properly. I just only felt this state of just dull anguish most of my life. I wasn't able to be interested in things that I used to be interested in when I was a kid, like things that I'm interested in now, like history and stuff. I just couldn't get into that stuff very well. I just was like barely a human being. Had just a lot of trauma and stuff weighing me down, and that does things to your brain. Like, I think it can actually damage your ability to properly process information and emotions and stuff. Like, I think depression can actually, like, really do things to you. And so, like, there was like a chakra in my system that was blocked, and I you know, I knew that I wanted to be a stoner ever since I was a kid, you know, but because I, you know, I had back then a lot of social anxiety. I have a little bit now, but I had a lot of it back then. So I never had any friends, really. So I never really had anybody who could procure me the drug before I was 21, and I could just go to the store and buy it. So, but when I was able to do that, that opened up serious doors for me psychologically. Like, suddenly I was able to experience emotion again. I was able to, like, really laugh and really cry again, and it was like, wow, this is like, it was super powerful, and I felt I was getting smarter every day. Like, I would just be able to process information way better than I was before. So it really kind of rescued my mind in a way. Then the thing is, though, I kind of was committed to just, like, yeah, I'm just gonna abuse this drug however much I want, because I wasn't concerned. I was so desperate and just not caring at that point that I was like, yeah, give me an addiction. That's what I want. So, but the thing is, like, I already knew quite a bit about the whole experience before I tried it, because I'd researched a bit about it. And one thing I knew, and this is something I actually knew from watching Graham Hancock on Joe Rogan. Do you remember Graham Hancock, Fingerprints of the Gods guy, the weird sort of alternative archaeology guy? He's a big drug user, and he talked about his experience with weed, with grass. I like calling it grass because that's like old-fashioned, like your grandpa called it grass, but like that was like what they called it in the 60s, you know, in the 70s. But anyway, he talked about his experience with grass, and he said, like, it got to the point where it was ridiculous. Like, he had a volcano vaporizer, and it was like he was using it way too much, and it was just controlling him and controlling his life, and it was And then, like, he did ayahuasca, I think, and he met the goddess who told him, you have to change your relationship with grass. And then he was like, okay, I'm gonna do that. And then he immediately went back to his volcano vaporizer. But then when he actually, the minute he inhaled, he was back there in that state of fear that he was in during the whole ayahuasca experience, and he was like, oh, okay, I just can't do this. And so he stopped doing it for a while, but then he got back on it. But the thing is, I knew that at some point I would reach like a kind of dead end zone where, man, why am I jittering? I knew I would reach like a dead end zone where suddenly, where like the benefits I was getting, I wasn't getting anymore, and it was just all drawbacks. And I think I got there, and then I kept using it for like a year after that because I don't have the best self-control. But once I was there, I was like, okay, that's what this is. I knew this was coming, and so it's just a matter of time now. And then eventually I did give it up for quite a decent length of time, like, I don't know, 8 months. But yeah, I mean, the point of me telling that story is that people talk about, like, specifically in the case of cannabis, people mention like the downsides of it. And I think there's a lot of people who are former cannabis users who quit, and then they have all these like whiny, you know, points to make about, oh, it was not good after all. It made me feel like it was good, but then it actually wasn't. And I just think that that's a very simplistic way to look at it. And I think that drugs like that have a specific utility that they're good for. And then they have a lot of other uses that they're not great for. So here's another one, alcohol. I didn't get into alcohol until relatively recently at the start of the year. And because it always seemed like such a trashy drug to me. It always seemed like such a, like a really gross drug. Like, I don't know, like the thing that you get exposed to in popular culture around alcohol is like people vomiting and getting hungover and being retarded, and it's like, why do people like this? And crying and then being angry and throwing things. Like, fucking Jesus, why would you do that? And so I never wanted to do it, but then I started doing it because I made friends, and my friends were drinking, or one of my friends was drinking, and so I was like, all right, I'll partake in order to you know, have a bit of fun. But then I found like, oh, actually no, this is not at all like what I thought it was. This is a totally different experience from what I had been led to believe by pop culture. And I found that actually alcohol can be a very, very, very great drug that has like actual practical purpose. And for me, that purpose, because as I've established, I have social anxiety. And before I was an alcohol user, I had really bad social anxiety. Now, since then, I don't anymore. And the alcohol is one thing that helped because it lowered my inhibitions enough. It didn't like make me retarded. It actually, I kept all of my intelligence, and I was very, very intelligent the whole way through. But it lowered my inhibitions enough that I could actually express myself and be myself for the first time. And that's like a very practical purpose for people who with social anxiety. But then, of course, there's, you know, there's the overuse of it, and you can you know, I've tested the limits with alcohol, you know. I've gone pretty far with it. I've never gone like, some of the people in Reno who I see are just like, I can't believe you could be that drunk. Because I feel like I've been really drunk before, but I've never been as drunk as some of the fucking crazy people I see in my life. So I don't know what their deal is, but apparently there's a lot of people who just can't handle their alcohol. I've always, like, my friends said that, like, I guess I just naturally have a really good grasp on alcohol. I don't know. They said, like, I handled it way better than most people do the first time. And actually one of them said that she didn't think she'd ever seen me drunk, even though most of the times I'd hung out with her, I was drunk. So, yeah. But the point is, you know, people, pro-drug people talk about this thing called personal responsibility and blah, blah, blah. Libertarians will talk about, you know, that kind of thing, and how you should, you know, oh, drugs should be legal and people should just partake in them as they wish and be responsible and blah, blah. And I basically agree with that. But that's not really where I'm coming from here. Because I don't think it's just a matter of drugs are a vice and you have to use them responsibly. Just indulge, but do it responsibly. I think they have a legitimate utilitarian purpose. They have like a utility to them is what I mean. They have like actual things that they can help you do. As for harder drugs, there's, you know, there might be some utility to those, but it seems like they're not something that you should get into lightly. And I'm not even really sure I agree with the libertarians that those really hard drugs should be legal. They should definitely not be criminal. Like, I think it's idiotic to be like, yeah, people are victimized by drugs, so let's punish them for using them. Like, what? Aren't they supposed to be the victims? Isn't the drug the punishment? Like, isn't like the addiction itself the punishment? That we want to like help them by not letting them be addicted to drugs, but like we're punishing them in order to help. It makes no fucking sense. So the criminalization of drugs makes no sense, but the legalization, that's a different matter. Because I'm not sure I trust normal people to like make those sorts of decisions when it comes to like really hard drugs. But there's a third type of drug it's not the soft drugs, caffeine, cannabis, alcohol. It's not the hard drugs. It's a third category, and that's the psychedelic drugs. And the reason I don't consider them hard drugs is because they're not poison. Like, you don't overdose on LSD, even though I've heard rumors and stuff, like I've heard people talk about that, but it's never actually happened. There's one time they gave an elephant a bunch of LSD and it died, but they also gave it a bunch of other stuff in order to keep giving it LSD, and so it was probably like the sedatives that killed the thing. But the psychedelics are interesting because they're very intense. They're not hard drugs, but they're very, very, very intense drugs. And they're not addictive. And so it's like a different category. And what they do is they like open up different parts of your brain to perceive things in ways that you couldn't have possibly perceived them before. And it's wicked wild what it does. I've only had one psychedelic experience with magic mushrooms, and I gotta say I was quite disappointed by it. It was not great. I mean, I kind of was going into it thinking, okay, I don't have any clue what's gonna happen. It could be great, it could be terrible, it could be disappointing, it could be nothing, it could be anything. It could be like the most horrifying experience of my life. It could be the most amazing, beautiful experience of my life. I was going into it with that knowledge, like, I'm just gonna do it and see what happens, because I have that inquisitive kind of mind. I want to know my brain. I want to see what it has to show me. And so I did, and it basically was like, yeah, you know how you're always like thinking yourself into black holes of nihilism and just like going in circles, questioning every thought and judgment in your head all the time? Well, let's show you that and then just crank it up to 1,000. That's what that was like. And it was just wonderful, wasn't it? But yeah, so it wasn't a great experience. In fact, I dare say it was probably like one of the hardest, if not probably like the worst thing I've ever been through. But the funny thing is that once you're on the other side, it's just a bad dream, you know? It's just like, oh, that happened. There's no trauma. There's no like lingering trauma from it. Of course, other people have had like lingering trauma from that kind of thing, but I don't know. I didn't. To me, it was just interesting. Now I just look back at it and I get interested in it, because there actually were, now that I'm not in it, I can see that there were a lot of interesting things that happened that I can look back on. And actually, when I get really stoned, it helps me really feel and recall that memory very well.
I'd like to take the opportunity to point out the fact that I actually do consider cannabis to be a psychedelic drug in a sense, because cannabis is a strange drug where it's not a stimulant, it's not a depressive, it's not a hallucinogen, but it kind of is all three at the same time. It's a very weird gray area, hard drug to define, and it does, I think, have psychedelic properties, in my opinion. As someone who has done psychedelics before and has a lot of experience with cannabis, I can say that there is definitely a connection there.
I could go into more detail in the future of what it was like, but yeah, the thing is that I think the proper use of the psychedelics is for like inquisitive experiences. Some people just do them recreationally for fun, like I just want to trip out and have a wild time. I don't know if I'm really that kind of person, but I do think that there's value to psychedelics for showing you different parts of your mind and just showing you different things, giving you like a different look at the world. But yeah, these are the utility functions of psychoactive drugs, psychoactive chemicals, which are very stigmatized. And I'm not saying that there shouldn't be a stigma to some degree against drugs, but I just think that it's very simplistic to just go around hating on them. It's also I also don't think it's entirely the correct approach to just be like, yeah, they should all be legal and we should all do them. And I also think that there's a worrying kind of normalization of pills in our culture right now, especially among my generation, with all these weird trap rappers taking Xannies and just going nuts. I don't get the appeal of that, and I think it seems like a really bad idea, and I think people should probably be more careful about not just like doing those kind of drugs, but like talking about them in their rap music, because it does kind of send a message, but even those pills, like benzos, they have a purpose. They have a need, but it's not for everybody, and it's a thing where I think that drugs, they have a purpose for certain people, for certain situations, and it's not even, I'm not even saying that like just getting high and enjoying that isn't worth it. Like, I think that's worth it too. I think that's a legitimate purpose. But, you know, there are ways to overindulge and then it becomes not good again. And there are ways to just properly use the thing for the correct intended purpose, and then that's not indulgence, in my opinion. That's not a vice, in my opinion. And I think that's really what I'm talking about, is the way these things are treated as vices, as in like, because the word vice implies that, okay, this thing is intrinsically bad, but we allow ourselves to enjoy it a bit because, you know, you gotta live a little. I think that's the wrong way to look at drugs. Like, obviously alcohol is very unhealthy. It is a toxin, and it is bad for your liver, and it does cause cancer. So like there are that's like the one that I would, out of the soft drugs and the psychedelics and whatnot, I would say that alcohol is probably the worst. But even that has so much good that can come of it. Like, and I didn't even go into proper detail. Like, I would have enlightening experiences when I was drunk. I haven't been drunk in a while because I've been on medication, powerful antifungal medication, and I can't drink. But man, I would have these enlightening, just pure, loving joy. It was like what people talk about when they're on psychedelics and they're having a good trip. That's kind of like what I was experiencing when I would get drunk. And so that, I think, is a very, very special, very important thing that nobody should be denied if it is indeed a thing that they can achieve, that they can attain. And that the long-term side effects of consuming alcohol shouldn't be ignored, but they should be measured against the utility of it. So I don't think it's appropriate to call these things vices unless they are vices. Like for me, cannabis was, at a certain point, it just became a vice. I don't think it is anymore, but at a certain point it was, and I knew that it was gonna be, so I kind of knew what I was getting into. But I think, you know, cannabis is such a harmless drug that I think if you're gonna go through that with any drug, make it cannabis, because it's done nothing to anybody ever except for cannabinoid hyperemesis. I think that's how you pronounce it, which is, yeah, a relatively rare condition, but it is something to think about. It is, you know, one of those things to put into the calculus when deciding what to do. But other than that, it's never done anything bad to anyone ever, really. I mean, I hear reports about like, oh, over time it slows down cognition. Well, you know what? For me, my cognition has only sped up in the last few years, so I think I'm doing good. But yeah, the only reason I'm talking about this is because I just like couldn't come up with another topic to talk about, so I figured, hey, I've been sitting on this one for a while. But yeah, this is VEDN Day 16. I'll see you tomorrow for VEDN Day 17. Bye.